Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. Now, candidate nominations for the 2021 local government elections have closed with a preliminary indication of high numbers of candidates at a whopping 59,272, with total seats being contested being 10,285. Is this an indication of a high interest in electoral democracy, or is it an indicator of disorganisation amongst political parties? We're joined now by the Commission's Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, Masego Sheburi. Thank you so much for making time to speak to us this morning. 257 municipalities. The Commission says the democratic project is well and alive in the country. What do you think contributed to the overwhelming submissions from political parties and independent candidates, and what's the significance of these big numbers?
From the Commission perspective, we think that the majority of people remain engaged with the democratic project, and men and women in our country have stood up to offer solution to the challenges that continue to confront communities in which they live. The number of contestants this year compares favorably to the number of contestants in 2016. So that we think from that perspective, that bodes well for democracy, in that people still believe in a democratic state as a better way of managing and organizing public affairs and matters of our communities.
Please unpack the compliance verification process that kicks in following the submissions, culminating in the final list of candidates being certified and published on the 7th of September.
Following the submission of candidates on Monday evening, the Commission is now seized with the responsibility to verify that each of those 59,000 candidates meet the requirements to stand as candidates. In other words, they were nominated properly. They are registered as voters in the municipality in which they wish to contest. They are party, and if they are independents, they themselves have paid the requisite deposit. On Friday, the Chief Electoral Officer will inform all political parties who have candidates that have for one or the other reason failed to meet the requirements. And those parties and candidates will have up till Monday at 1700 hours to cure the deficiencies that may be attended to their submissions.
Now, political parties usually surpass independents in terms of numbers, but with independents now being given more leeway, can you give us, in terms of a ratio, what does it look like this time around? Are the political parties still more than the independents?
Indeed, political parties still dominate the political space. We have in excess of 200 political parties that have submitted documents to contest these elections. The number of independents has increased marginally from the last elections in 2018. As we speak, we're sitting with 944 submissions from independents. We will know after the verification process and on the day when we publish the list of all candidates that have met the requirements, and that is on the 7th. We will know whether the number sustains or it has gone higher. But the number of candidates representing political parties has, consistent with previous elections, been in the majority.
Now, 74% of the nominations required were captured online. Is this yet another indication of how the South African electoral process is going?
With each election, we introduce innovation to make it easier for stakeholders to manage their affairs. The online candidate nomination achieves two things. It introduces administrative efficiencies. Secondly, it allows the parties total control over their list process and when they submit those list process. So those lists we don't have to see, they do not need to submit to an IEC office. The party can on its own capture those persons and submit their list. On our part, we've built into the nomination system the preliminary verification. So for example, a party will know upfront if they capture an ID number of their candidate, they will upfront know that that person is registered as a voter or not registered as a voter. So it introduces a lot of efficiencies and limits the amount of work that we need to do post-close of candidate nominations. So 74% of the candidates were nominated using the online system. 26% were those who submitted, who made manual submissions at any of our local offices. And for that reason, we will continue up till about midday today to finalize the capture of those candidate submissions that were received before 2100 hours physically at our offices.
Now, with the uncertainty around the actual date pending court decisions, there's questions around the possible reopening of both the registration for voters and the candidates list. What's the actual position here?
Indeed, that is correct. On our part, we are maintaining two election timetables. The first one relates to the election that has been lawfully called by the minister responsible for cooperative governance for the 27th of October. In that scenario and for that election, we will not have a registration weekend and the candidate nomination processes have closed. If the court finds in our favor and authorizes an election to be held sometime early next year, the Commission will be able to put in measures to increase the chances that that election will be constitutionally compliant, in that we will schedule a general voter registration weekend to enable young persons who've just turned 18, persons who've moved residence from the last time when they registered, to update their details and to register as new voters. As it relates to the timetable, the Commission will issue a new timetable that starts an election from scratch. And what that means is that there will also be a new candidate nomination cutoff date and time for all political parties and those who intend to contest. So an election in February next year allows us to run a registration weekend, but to also start a new candidate nomination process from scratch. Parties that have submitted can retain their list, or they can amend their list, or they can resubmit the list as it currently stands.
Thank you so much for talking to us this morning. We have time restrictions, so I cannot ask you, and I'll just state this, that in your statement, the IEC talks about experiencing protests by members of political parties at Election House yesterday and wishing to indicate that the Commission is not entrusted with the responsibility to mediate internal party disputes, parties being urged to set a process to manage internal disputes. Masego Sheburi, the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer at the IEC, thank you so much for making the time to speak to us this morning.